If you're watching this, then you know by now a huge problem is heading our way. An emergency meeting is being called at our usual place immediately. Free bagels.
I think one of the reasons I really wanted to do Moonfall was because it related to the odd times in which we find ourselves living in with this COVID pandemic. And I think normally big disaster movies like this are movies that people seem to gravitate towards. I think they can see themselves in them. We all have this fascination about the end of the world and what would that look like and how would we live through that? Would we live through that? And because the pandemic is so much, I think, a part of our everyday life right now, a movie like this sort of resonated with me in a different way. I thought it would be more relatable now than ever before within the constructs of our life right now. I had one conversation with Roland in the early days. It was very quick. We talked about the movie. You read a movie like this and you really understand what it's about. It's pretty easy to understand. So we sort of had a meeting of the minds. And originally this role was written for a man, though I do know that. And so credit to Roland for taking a character that was male and then realizing that this could be a female character and still have the same impact. I describe Fowler as wicked smart. I think she's a woman who survived in a man's world. You don't become an astronaut, and when we find her, she is, the deputy director of the NASA. You don't find a woman in that position who isn't extremely intelligent, strong, has a real sense of self about her. She's very willful. She's had to survive in this world and hold her own. And so that's how I describe her. She's strong. I love characters. I love women and characters like this. Yeah, I think we find them in the beginning and they're the best of friends. Like Brian was at her wedding. She clearly knew he knew her husband. And they were like workmates. Like I was his, work wife and he was my work husband. And very, very close. And then this event happens in the movie where we get estranged. There's sort of a misunderstanding, something very confusing and scientifically unexplainable happens. And my character doesn't exactly stand up for him the way she probably could have. And he sort of takes the fall, and sort of that starts the beginning of the unraveling of their relationship. And we get to visit them again in the movie, and they have a chance to sort of wrong that right, to come to terms with what happened and realize that neither one of them were right or wrong. It was just a very unfortunate situation that was hard to explain, and they sort of went their separate ways as a result of it. Well, what's happening is the moon is threatening to crash into Earth. And when it does that, before it gets there, it'll break into a billion, trillion little pieces that will all come crashing onto the Earth and will pretty much kill everyone. So, they've got a big problem that they're trying to figure out a way to solve. And what we come to find out is that there's some sort of alien force at work, and it goes against everything that science believes. So you have the battle of science and metaphysics and what is possible in both of those realms. But it's clear that something is happening that has caused the moon to move out of its orbit and start descending onto Earth, and there's a ticking clock on it. So if they don't get up to the moon and figure out what this thing is and sort of destroy it, then little by little, the moon is moving closer and closer to the Earth and potentially causing destruction. That opening attack, first of all, we're looking at nothing. There's nothing. It's all imagination, and I think these are movies that, are very different from other movies. we really have to be able to commit to our imagination, and Roland can share with us the previs and give us a basic idea of what will be happening, but we know all too well that it's going to be more vivid, more alive, more real than we can even imagine. But we're forced to use our imagination and work to Roland or someone else reading out things to us that are actually happening that we have to react to. And it's a really different way of working. It sometimes can feel very disconnected, very, disjointed. We have to trust in what's going to happen on the other side, because we really literally, for the most part, are really looking at nothing much but some visuals on a screen that are kind of assimilating what we might see with color tone and light flashes, things like that. But we're really not seeing anything of what we're really going to see. We were out on the street. It's supposed to be an LA street, and we're in Montreal, Canada. So we were racing the snowfall and the winter coming, because we were shooting in the fall. But yeah, we were out on a big street, and we're retrieving our Endeavour. And of course, there's nothing. So we have to just imagine that this big spaceship is being rolled down the street and rolling through a neighborhood that's crashing all the, structures down around it. And again, it's just, back to acting basics 101, using our imagination and creating for ourselves what that would look like, feel like, how we would, feel in the situation. That's the job on movies like this. It's a lot of really make-believe. Recreating the gravity was pretty easy for me. I played an astronaut on a television show once for 2 years, so I actually did a zero-G flight, which was amazing to get to do that. So I have in my body what it feels like to float, and what weightlessness is, and how the body moves, and I really understood fundamentally what that was. So those were just fun things for me to revisit. The stunts weren't, based on what I've done in the stunt world, the stunts were pretty mild on this for me. Roland does like to build, and luckily he's got the money to build. Not everybody does these days, so he has been building up a storm. That's true, and the sets are, just walking into the NASA set was pretty impressive. I think many people have a secret fantasy about walking into one of the most important rooms in the world and actually standing in there and feeling what that would feel like. So that was, I think, pretty impressive. And then also sitting inside the shuttle. While it was in pieces, and we used different parts of it at different times, it was also still pretty impressive to realize, just how small the space is, and how these astronauts have to sort of maneuver in this capsule, this very small world, and how actually claustrophobic that actually is. We know that we're touching buttons that real astronauts have touched, and real equipment that they actually use to fly, and we also had an astronaut here with us to also give us, all the rundown about the buttons, what we should push, not push, so that we tried to bring as much authenticity to all of those scenes as we possibly could. So we weren't just, if we were pushing buttons or clicking things, we weren't just randomly choosing, oh, this looks good, I'm gonna do that. We had a lot of, advice and sort of tutelage on what were the right buttons, and when you push what for what, and why you do what you do. So we tried to keep it as authentic as we could. Our movie, there's a very interesting school of thought that maybe the moon is a megastructure. Maybe the moon is been built by a alien life form, and that the inside of the moon is actually hollow, and there's this life living inside of the moon. So we sort of explore that thought in this movie, and what if that were true? And that's sort of the metaphysics, element to this movie that sort of is juxtaposed to the science that we think we know and that we believe in. So that's what makes it a little different. But I think the moon is really, really powerful. Whatever it is, or anyone thinks it is, it's true that the moon has such a gravitational pull on the tides. It has so much pull on us as humans because we're mostly water. So if it can change, you know, the tide, the biggest body of water on the earth, I think we have to believe that it can also affect us as humans because we are largely water. So I think the moon is very, very powerful, and I'm always in tune with when there's a full moon, when there's a blood moon, when all the moons become really important in my life. And I meditate a lot, and the moon is really, really important. I think we do make a ragtag group. That's a really good way to put it. We are all kind of anti-heroes. I don't think any one of us want to be there, but yet we have to be there, you know. And I think it's great that Brian is sort of this disgruntled, doesn't want to be there, but knows he has to be there. He's struggling to get his life together. He was, you know, he dipped off and became a person who struggled with alcohol and sort of keeping his life together. My character is there because she's an expert navigationist, so she has to be the one to guide the mission and make sure we get where we're going. Brian gets to fly the shuttle, and Casey represents, I think, the everyday average guy on the flight of his life. You know, he's not an astronaut, has nothing to do with NASA, but yet he's this brilliantly he has this brilliant mind that has come up with the idea that the moon is a megastructure. So we realize we need him because if in fact it is a megastructure, then we're going to want a megastructure up there when we get there. So we take him along, but he represents an everyday guy. If you got to go on a space shuttle, you'd be seeing it through the eyes of that guy. So it's a fun group. He, you know, Casey, John brings the levity. He brings a lot of humor, you know, to the movie, and I think movies like this need that. I hope my character brings some heart to it. I think being the woman up there while she has to survive in a man's world, I think a woman's sensibility is often very different than a man's, and I hope my character brings a little bit of that. And, you know, Brian, Patrick just brings, you know, the brawn of a man. He's there to try to save this day any way he can, and so I think it makes us like a good trio. We all bring something a little different.
It's on airplane mode.
Looks like we're in for nasty weather.